Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
It is I, the one, the only. That was the thing that I'm going. All right, I'll send you these two covers. There. All right, let's get into this. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A geek for fun.
And I'm that Matt Kid.
Indeed, he is. So we're continuing our tradition that I decided to start of switching co-hosts, having different geeky gentlemen come in and join the party, and as we're going through this series, talking about Batman character origin pieces and such. Yeah, that's the series. It so just rolls right off the tongue. So far we've covered Year 1, Man Who Laughs, Birth of the Demon, and Ra's al Ghul Year 1. So it's a pretty good chunk of things. But now we're kind of moving into what I basically wanted to get into, and it kind of morphed into including a bunch of other shit because why not? It's fun. Which is to cover a bunch of annuals that came out in the mid-90s. They're all from the same year, 1995. And they all deal with the same header. It's Batman book Year 1, and then it'll have so-and-so character on the cover. And so this week we're covering Catwoman Year 1, as well as Riddler Year 1. They appeared both in the Catwoman annual from 95 and the Detective Comics annual from 95. Thought it was pretty funny that Riddler got put in a Detective Comics annual. I thought that was nice, fitting, good editing choice on that part. So I'm gonna go real quick and just ask: have either of you read any of these stories before?
No.
I'm familiar with the Riddler one, but I've never actually read it. But my wife is a big Riddler fan, so she's talked to me about this story before, but I've never actually read it.
Yeah. Sorry, I got distracted. Fuck, what? Haley came in the room, mouthed something to me, I have no idea what it was, and so I just completely lost my train of thought.
No, I was just saying I was just saying I'm familiar with the Riddler one, but I've never actually read it, and then I've never read the Catwoman one either.
Okay. This was stuff I used to just go to my comic shop when I was first getting into comics, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get from the very beginning of the timeline and read all the way because I was an idiot. And so I bought a bunch of these, and I didn't even realize how many there were. I recently just found another one that we'll be covering in a couple weeks at a comic convention here in town. And so I'd read both of these stories in the past, but with quite a bit of distance between them. I've been kind of dancing around something as I talk about these in previous episodes, kind of referencing them. And the Catwoman one, I'm gonna hold no bars against. Of these that I have read, the Catwoman one is objectively the worst. But I had a bit of a Mandela effect with this, because it's still pretty bad, but it's not as insultingly bad as I thought it was. So the Catwoman one starts off, and you've got Selena jumping out of a window and falling into a river, and for some reason I had this Mandela moment where I thought that when she jumped out of the window she was the Year 1 Frank Miller black Catwoman, and then she falls in the river and emerges white Catwoman, and I just found that shit really insulting. Ultimately, you still kind of get something really flimsy like that with oh no, it was just the light. When they try to really bridge these two together, and I don't know, I always found that still just at least a little weird, if not awkward. What did you guys think of the Catwoman one? I don't want to pass too much judgment here.
I literally hated it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, Alfie. You were about to say something.
No, I feel your one had far more in the comedic timing. I'm all for that. I was actually gonna throw some fisticuffs with our host here because he's been hyping this one up for me, saying it was so bad, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, there's a bad Batman comic. That was always fun. But this was just kind of like, yeah. I could see this coming out in like New 52 or something, because just like a standard bog mediocre Catwoman story, but like I didn't think anything offensive about it. There's not really much interesting about it. It does that thing that I think origin stories tend to do, and I kind of have this problem with the Riddler story one as well, where everything needs to have an explanation for it. So, Batman mentions she's good at karate in this one thing, but then she's like a superhero. How does that happen? Well, it's because she secretly had this training from this ninjas and all of that. And then it's she's got the Catwoman costume, which in Batman Year One was just like a cheap Halloween costume she made out of cloth, and it was kind of humble and showed the difference between her and Batman because of the resources. Oh no, it's an experimental mining costume that is impervious to knives and other such threats. Don't you worry, you can get this on a sex worker's salary apparently. Like all of that I thought was unneeded and just made me kind of go roll my eyes, but I didn't think any of this was egregious. It feels like it's someone was really, really happy to be able to write scenes from Year One. Yeah. So like that's almost kind of adorable in how much that kind of fits in. But other than that, yeah, I was just mostly just wanting it to be worse than it was because I just don't have that much to say.
That was what I thought was weird about this, because I'm reading this book and like I really like Year One. I probably like Year One more than Dark Knight Returns. I like Year One a lot. Year One is this like, it's this like fucking gritty ass, the art in Year One is this down and dirty. Batman is just wearing this cloth suit. I mean, it feels like he wanted to make this feel like a very down to earth world. And so to then see redrawn panels of Year One to be like, okay, so while Year One is happening, this like gritty ass origin Batman story, while this is going on, simultaneously Selina is being trained by secret cat ninjas. I'm just like, the fuck? Like, and it takes some of the really interesting iconography from Year One, the black Catwoman with the short hair, and they make it, they take away, I feel, some of the agency that made those choices interesting. Like, you see Catwoman in Year One and you're just like, whoa, that's Selina Kyle. She's this like short-haired dominatrix who's not even the skin color we're used to. Like, that's a really interesting choice that stands out. And it's just like, oh, well, no, she was like basically kidnapped and forced into it, and her hair was cut short because they forcibly cut it short. And I'm just like, I just feel like it took away a lot of the coolness of the choice to portray Selina that way in Year One. It took away a lot of the agency from that character that I kind of really liked about her. I just really didn't care for this. And I don't mind the idea that Selina has this sort of like Zen ninja martial arts side to her. I think that's kind of neato. So I don't necessarily mind the idea that she was maybe trained by yet another secret society of ninjas that exists. But
in Gotham.
Yeah, in Gotham. But just overall, I felt like this cheapened what I liked about Selina in Year One and really didn't add anything terribly compelling. So it's just kind of a net negative for me.
That's kind of how I feel about it. Like, again, I remembered it more insulting than it was. I still think that is a really weird, cheap move to try to go, okay, yeah, we're gonna put Year One in continuity, but Catwoman's black. Well, we're not gonna make Catwoman black. We're just it's the light. I think that is such a weird choice because
Yeah.
Catwoman shows up in several scenes in year one, and the lights are always different. Yet here, oh no. It's a weird choice.
I mean, we've been dealing with that since like Long Halloween, though, right? Like, I think putting that on this book isn't really fair. I think that's just a DC thing.
I mean, I guess, but it's still.
I think it is, but if you're going to purposefully use the iconography of year one, I think it stands out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Yeah, like, it just feels awkward. It like, I guess this is the better way to have done it, but still, like, going more atmospheric with it and stuff, I guess. But yeah, what you were kind of talking about, Alfie, with the costume is probably the thing that feels the most ridiculous to me because, like, they go to such lengths to justify, oh yeah, it's the skin-tight outfit, but also I'm wearing it backwards because the hose is going to be a cattail. The thing that really cracks me up about that panel in particular is you get that night, the gratuitous full body shot of Catwoman, and then, like, there's an image of her jumping out a window and clawing away into the night. And, like, you see her whip wrapped around her chest and the tail kind of flopping in the wind, and I'm like, why can't the whip just be the tail? Like, when she's not using the whip, she wraps it around herself and it looks like a tail. That's all you need, and yet it's just it's such a simple design thing and no one does it. It cracks me up. Except like the Arkham games. So, like, that's just like one of those egregious things. But then for me, I guess it didn't bother you as much as it did me, Matt. I'll be curious to see how Alfie feels about it. I really hate the ninja stuff here, and it's like the majority of the book because it's not only like, oh, year one's this grittier, more realistic Gotham that just happens to have a ninja cult in it. It's not just that. It's just that, like, the ninjas are, like, really generic, and they feel even extra tacked on to year one in a weird way because Catwoman's got her inspiration from Batman kind of moment in the middle of this book, and yet she's still coming and going from the dojo, which just makes it feel like it just doesn't feel like it meshes. It feels like I feel like the writer had a Catwoman origin story that involved ninja training, and then they were told, okay, we want you to do a Catwoman origin. And they're like, great, I've got it. There's going to be ninjas and shit. And they're like, okay, cool. But it's got to mesh with year one. And then they're like, yeah, I can make this work. Like, that's the thing that feels so awkward to me. I notice that a lot, like, when I can tell that things feel really stitched together as opposed to naturally or organically growing. Because, I mean, just the thief stuff has next to nothing to do with most of the ninja stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which is weird. Like, it's not that it's not connected, but it's just, it feels so tangential that it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I collect the question, so I have a soft spot for putting weird ninja shit next to, like, gritty crime shit. But when I read this, I think that's a big part. What you said, the ninjas come across as so generic that it feels like they're really just there to explain how Catwoman fight good, and they're not really there to expand on her character or challenge her in a terribly interesting way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of it. And also just, and I'm not going to lay this at the blame of this because this was written back in the 90s, but post, looking at Batman where we are now and looking at the history of it, I'm just getting kind of tired of the answer being trained by ninjas and secret societies. And maybe that was slightly less. I wasn't reading current comics at the time of 1995 because I was like 3, but I also just found it very cliche and kind of played out.
Mm-hmm.
Who's gonna do the story where they have a book club with the Court of Owls, the Black Glove, and now these guys?
I always like the idea that like someone shows up to the Black Glove meeting wearing their Court of Owls mask and was like, oh shit, sorry, wrong
Yeah, it's
wrong
just
attire.
He's got his gi on still. He's like, when you have to go to a court of owls at 5, but the ninja scene training's at 6.
Oh god.
One of my things that I feel like you've touched on a very good point, Ian, about it feeling stitched together. And even if this was not tied to year 1, even this was trying to be a standalone, like the Riddler one is later on, or even how we've been doing with the race ones, what I feel like they have that's to the strength of the piece is they work even just as standalone origin stories, because they do the very basic thing of, okay, what is the core of this character? What are the basic tenets of this character that have existed since they've first been introduced, no matter what versions, that make them this character? And how can we take person A and get them to that and show bits and pieces of that on the way, for better or worse execution? This, Catwoman, as a concept, has nothing to do with ninjas at all in any of her iterations, even when you have to justify that she can fight Batman and stuff. Like, I don't think you need that. This book even gives a good reason why you don't need that, because she gets her ass kicked and then she talks about, yeah, I'm not a good martial artist, but I'm a great thief, and then she figures out a way to like get the upper hand on someone. Like, there's your moment, there's your character beat of proving why Catwoman is different than a Batman rogue or a Lady Shiva or a Talia, why she doesn't have to fight someone 1v1, because if Catwoman was doing her job properly, she's never going to have to fight anyone. She's going to be in and out, and then she's going to be gone. I feel Catwoman year 1 should be focusing entirely on, if you want to tie it in with year 1, show us those early days where we get like a little sneak peek in year 1 where she's testing out being Catwoman and the media's not believing it's her, she thinks she's Batman. You could do an entire story around about her figuring out how to move from thief to costumed thief. How does the game change? How do the police react to her differently? She makes a very good point here where she's like, oh yeah, I had to go underground because the police were on me and I had to wait for the heat to die down. But in the era of costume villains and stuff, you can make an argument that that's actually helping her job now, because they're expecting, like, some days she just does it as stealing a Kylo, and some days she does robbery as Catwoman, and it's throwing people off. Because when the police officers see her in the costume, they react differently, and she can tie that into, this is why he wears the costume, because it gives a reaction, and when I do it's very different, but all of it ties together. There is a moment I like here where the direct parallel to year 1, where she gets to see the blood and she's like, not Batman, Batman. And I feel like that's where you get into the idea of, okay, she's figuring out how to do superhero or supervillain from Batman, which when we get into Man of Laughs, when we did that discussion, we talked about how Joker's not necessarily starting something, he's just ahead of the curve, he's just seeing things coming. So tying in Catwoman into that kind of era of, oh, okay, you're getting a live demonstration of how to do this from Batman without him meaning to, so more people will start copying him. And I think there's your story. That's some good shit. It's just so tangent. And then you got like the yin and yang of the cat and the dog and the hellhound. I'm just like, what is happening?
It always bothers me. Oh, God.
I just want to add in real quick. Like, there is a Catwoman year 1 story in Batman year 1, and you could just show those chapters, right? Like, there's that whole subplot of like, oh, she's stealing from these people and she's stealing from these people, and that really should be the book. I really agree with you there, Alfie. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh no, I was gonna say I really like what you said about the idea, because the idea that she might do some robberies as Selina and some as Catwoman is cool in the way that it mirrors the way that, you know, Bruce will often go undercover or just do things as Bruce Wayne. And so there's a lot of potential here to continue mirroring those characters. But one thing I was going to say is, one thing I always hate in these types of origin stories is that everything has to have some sort of like genesis to it. Like, she can't just be someone who really likes cats and that's why she became Catwoman. Like, we have to do this whole, like you were saying, the yin and yang of the cat, and we have to have this ninja clan that also has some cat stuff going on with it. Like, she can't just be a person who likes cats.
Yep.
And I'm not saying it's not like, I've seen it way more egregious than I have, in here for sure.
At least she's not like falling out of a fucking building and getting resurrected by cats again.
Exactly. Like, that like I've seen it way more egregious, but that's something that in origin stories does always bother me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There's so much wrong with this, and I kind of just, man, I just really wish we had the Black Catwoman book. Like, Black Catwoman is a concept that just works on like a really fundamental level, and I don't know why, and I kind of fear that it maybe makes me a bit racist, but like, I just love the idea that of Selena Kyle being black. I think it just works for her character really well, and it informs things, particularly when you got like the whole start from the bottom kind of like angry at society thing. I think that just plays really well. And it's a concept that has unfortunately never really been properly delivered. I think there's a lot of context and a lot of subtext you can play with there. And as often as we've cast Catwoman as a black actress, or we've made her black in the comics or whatever, I don't think I've read the story that does anything with those racial themes.
No.
Yeah, it's
Which is
disappointing.
a shame.
Like, Eartha Kitt's fine and fun and everything, and Halle Berry's movie never happened. It's a real shame that they shot a whole Catwoman movie and it just, like, the footage all burned, and no one has ever seen it. Because I'm sure it would have been great. And then, I don't know, like, the actress for the Batman, they cast black actress for the Batman, didn't they?
Yeah, Zoe
Yes, Zoe
Kravitz.
Kravitz.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm probably like irrationally hyped for that movie, but I'm wondering if they will touch any of that just because of, I mean, frankly, the political climate of today is very different than it was even in 1995, 2000, even in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if that's going to be touched at all.
I mean, her entire casting story could work. As
oh yeah,
just
oh for
fucking-
sure.
The fact that she did The Dark Knight Rises and they got told you can't do it because you're too urban for Catwoman, which is such a fucking joke. I'm just saying those words.
Yeah, I'm like, have you read a thing about Catwoman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So that'll be interesting. I don't know. This is one of those things where the year one title, just, it has so much weight and potential to it. And it's so disappointing because, Alfie, you're right. This isn't the worst thing ever. I feel like, yeah, I could see this as some crap that came out in like early days of the New 52. This could be like the zero issue back when New 52 did a zero issue of a non-existent Catwoman book that we don't talk about because I don't want to think about the fact that Batman likes to have his nipples rubbed. But like it's just one of those things where it isn't the worst thing ever. It's just not very good, and it's heightened by the fact that it has the year one title associated with it. I feel like if you really want to make your comic suck, take a mediocre comic and put year one on the title, and then instantly it's awful.
I mean, there's your fucking... When are we gonna do the Superman? You don't know how fucking bad I was by that. Batman gets a good year one. Wonder Woman in the Rucker run in Rebirth gets that book called year one, so she gets a redemption. She's had that twice now. And Superman, though, no. So yeah, I fully understand. That's a weird thing we have in comics, right? Is when we have a legacy work that stands on its own but then becomes an imprint almost.
Old man.
yeah, exactly that, to the point where, because of the weight of a work, people assume that having it is almost this prestige title.
Whatever happened.
Yeah, but I mean that was the one case where that's kind of worked out.
No, because whatever happened to the Manhunter from Mars is awful.
I didn't know that was a thing until now, so there you go.
It's a single issue in Brightest Day. It's bad. It's not good.
Fair enough. But like, I think even Marvel does this as well. With like the end stuff, there's just like a weird thing where does something having to name by this convention? Do we have to follow the standards? Is it something we should do as like a pitch? Because that's kind of what it is, right? As you say, Catwoman year one, and then it's like a pitch. You immediately get ideas for what this character should be. You see any character year one, and the story kind of writes itself, or at least it should. Or is that something that is decided after the fact? Like, I'm very curious in the production of these. Was it just DC editors? This is probably the most likely one of just like, okay, everyone, we're doing year one specials for all these characters for these books. Here's make your pitch. This is your time to put it on. We're just gonna slap it on to get the money, which is probably what happened. Or is it we have these origin stories for these characters, we want them to get recognized. Let's put year one on it because it's got the press.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's got to be a little bit of all of the above. I mean, there's certainly a benefit to basing your story off of an existing story or at least an existing title that is critically beloved and financially successful. It's going to make people stop and maybe pay attention to it a little bit more. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't tell meaningful and interesting stories with it, but I feel like it's kind of the same thing as when you adapt material that sometimes you're so, you know that it's got name recognition, so potentially you're not bringing your A game in terms of the creative talent you bring onto the story, because you know that because you've got that year one moniker, you're going to sell no matter what. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say, because I mean, I'm sure there's both, because clearly not all of these were bad and some of them were, so it's I think it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I think one thing that's worth mentioning is I think this one is the worst of them, at least so far, because it's got the hardest road to climb. You know, Batman Year One doesn't introduce us to the Joker. It doesn't introduce us to Riddler, Man-Bat, any of that. It just is, and that's all you got. The one character it does introduce us to is Catwoman. So to try to take that very particular, very Frank Miller version of Catwoman and put her in and morph her into, you know, main continuity Catwoman is, I think, a really hard task that, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure you could succeed at doing. Like, I think this might be one of those things that just was doomed to fail.
It's like trying to take Dark Knight Returns Batman and make him your main Batman for your continuity.
Which
they not tried that anyone's ever tried to
10
do
years.
that.
Yeah. That was 10 years of
exactly.
Batman.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if I necessarily agree, though, because, I mean, Matt, if you've got a point, go ahead, because I think mine will be a bit long.
Oh, no, I was just saying that, like, you know, you look at something like Dark Knight Returns, you look at something like Year One that are these very definitive single stories that take risks with the characters that someone writing something knowing it's going to be in mainstream continuity would either not take or not be allowed to take.
Well, that's where I disagree with, particularly with Year One, because how Miller writes Batman in Year One and Dark Knight Returns are very intentionally different. The Dark Knight Returns was written with the idea of directly challenging Batman in pop culture and addressing his roots, and also kind of bringing Batman to his most extreme deliberately. This was obviously not realized by all the writers that followed and wrote Batman in his 30s like this. Sure, but this was meant to be Batman where Bruce Wayne was fully broken and gone. Like, we see the death of Bruce Wayne in Dark Knight Returns in issue 1, and it's just Batman. And this is Batman without that moral compass. This is Batman to his limits. But still, most noticeably not as much of a dick as some other Batmans, but we'll leave it at that. Year One, however, is Frank Miller just doing Batman straight. It's Batman at his youth, so he's making mistakes, but he's still very kind. He's fucking taking bullets to save cats and old ladies. Like, this is Batman, fully the comic book superhero, primed and ready to go. And I think the same for Catwoman. Yeah. I don't think when he was writing Catwoman, he was deliberately going, I'm doing an alternative take. I think he was very much just like, well, why can't Catwoman be black? Why can't this just be how it is? And it's just DC cold feet didn't let it work. If this came out in 2012, I think this would have been a fucking the whole other world. Frank Miller could write like this still, but it would have been a very popular and just been the takes just been like, okay, this is just how Catwoman's going to be until the next reboot, maybe. I don't think this has to be doomed to fail. I think this is a solid take. I just think this is not a good writer. I don't think the concept is inherently flawed or doomed in any way. I think any person worth their salt could have done this story and done it quite easily, quite well. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece, but all the pieces are laid out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting one. I am kind of tempted to agree with you, Alfie, because I do think just the fact that we have to justify Catwoman being able to keep up with Batman and stuff is weird to me. I still don't like the idea of Catwoman ninja training, not just because it's cliche, but just it doesn't fit the character. Frankly, Catwoman's not a disciplined enough person for martial arts training, I think. She's kind of her whole thing is that she's very impulsive. And I don't think that meshes well, at least with what we're shown here. Shit, dropped something. So I think that's just a weird thing. I don't know, I kind of like the idea that if Catwoman gets into a scrape, she's really just good at dodging. She's got dodging down, and she's got running away down. I think that's kind of all you really need for her. Dodging, running away, and cheat. Find a way to win that they're not expecting, as opposed to beating them up.
I like the idea that that would be what separates Catwoman from any other type of martial artist. Catwoman could maybe take Talia not because she's the better martial artist, but because she will fight dirty. And I always really like that. But I mean, there are moments in this book where Catwoman calls someone sensei and he calls her Neko-chan. And at that point, I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm checked out. Like,
senpai. Notice me, senpai.
Yeah, exactly. At that point, I'm just like, oh, okay, what am I even reading? Because
this is the
you're
best
right.
justification for Batcat there's ever been. They're both just weebs.
I think there is something kind of weirdly, because I don't mind mixing the like street level thug stuff with like weird mystical martial arts stuff. Like obviously that's a very popular thing to do. And I don't even necessarily think Catwoman is a bad vehicle to maybe try to explore that. But yeah, the way it's done here does feel very kind of at odds with the character that we all know.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Especially, just thinking more about the whole martial arts thing. A whip is not a very good martial arts weapon, but it's a really good weapon to keep distance from somebody. Yeah. And that kind of just plays in it. All right. That's kind of all I got. Anyone have anything else they want to say about Catwoman Year One before we move on?
I don't know why it's there. I think it's just there to justify how much, I think we're just gonna be honest. I mean, the Year One costume is intentionally meant to be a bit crappy, right? Like it's meant to look bad as a costume, like the color scheme and stuff like that. And then we get immediately ditch it for the purple one. I like that that's mentioned in here, but I also think that's kind of the symptom of like, here's how Han Solo got his blaster. It's just like everything needs an answer. Even where she has two costumes, we have to mention that. So I don't know, that's all I've got. I find the evolution of Catwoman's costume in comics very interesting ever since the Tom King issue where like it fully displays out and just like how many varied looks she has. I think it could have been fun to maybe delve on that aspect a little more. Like she tries the dress out and she's
the
just like,
dress. I love the dress.
yeah, and she's just like, well, this is a look, but it's not very practical. So maybe I'll do some jobs with the practical one, but then some flashier jobs where I know Batman's going to be there. I want to wear the dress.
Yeah, that could be fun. All right, let's go ahead and move on and talk about Detective Comics Annual Number 8 from 1995. Does this story have a title? I don't know if this story ends up having a title. Oh, yes, Questions Multiply the Mystery. This is written by Chuck Dickhead, and that's probably all I'll talk about with my feelings on Chuck Dixon, with art by Kieran Dwyer. So, yeah. And I asked at the beginning if you read either of these, so got a no on that. Alfie, I'm a little curious on you because you're the more wild card on this, but Alfie, what did you think of this?
This I thought was substantially better than the Catwoman one. However, I feel it is, to me at least, the second weakest of what we've read so far here. This I feel like with its take on the Riddler, has some ideas I like, but at the same time, personally, it doesn't deal with the Riddler in how I like to see him, where he's legitimately... I guess we'll go more into that later on, but just in like a summation, Riddler here is played more akin to Forever being the C-lister, where I always argue that the Riddler should be one of the top Batman threats, and I don't really particularly like. I can see why, if this was the origin for a few years, why people just ran with that take.
How about you, Matt? What'd you think?
This is my Riddler. This is how I always want to see Riddler. Riddler is a whiny, obnoxious little narcissist who will always want to be better than he is. This is hands down my Riddler. I adored reading this. This was the Riddler I've missed seeing. I'm not against making Riddler more of a threat, but this is exactly the type of... When he says, yeah, I could do crime and I could probably get away with it and be great at it, but then that's just another job, and I have to make it a performance because I want people to think I'm more than I am. Like, that's... I just loved it. That's exactly my Riddler, and this is pretty much how I would love to see. And obviously I want the character to evolve and stuff like that, but this is kind of the way I always imagine my Riddler.
And I really do agree with this, with you there. This is a really good take on Riddler. It's not my favorite. There are still like problems I see. It's symptomatic of a thing for me, which is how to phrase this. I like it when characters buy what they're selling, and I don't think this Riddler 100% is buying what he's selling, in that he's got this whole, I want to prove that I'm smarter than everyone else thing, but also in the same story he admits that he cheats constantly.
Yeah.
And
that's what I love about it.
Really? Because that's the thing that bothers me. So the thing I like about the idea that the Riddler doesn't cheat is it's like, I just love those Batman moments where like he's really got him and then Batman cheats and Riddler's like, well, no, I'm really the winner. You cheated. Like, I like that Riddler that gets upset at Batman for changing the rules on him, as opposed to like the guy who would do the rule changes. I don't like it when... I don't like the idea that the Riddler is a cheater. I like the idea that, like, if you play it fair, like if you really are smarter than him, then you'll beat him every time. I like the Riddler to kind of go for that approach, to some degree. I think you can do some interesting, Holmes and Moriarty circling each other kind of things, outthinking the thinking, going deeper and deeper, getting more meta with it. But in general, I really do like for the Riddler to not be about, I cheated to figure out this puzzle. I would like it to be, I am really that smart. But like his intelligence hasn't been good enough. It hasn't gotten him where he needs to be or where he wants to be. So the establishment of the Riddler identity is his way of kind of putting himself up on a pedestal.
Yeah. I always liked it because what I liked about the Riddler is that he's not a person who wants to be smart. He's a person who wants to look smart. He's a person who doesn't want to, at least in my Riddler, he's not a person who wants to invest time in making himself the smartest man in the world. He wants to invest time in making sure everyone else in the room thinks he's the smartest man in the world. And so I don't think that him being a cheat would preclude him from getting mad at Batman for cheating, because to him, it's all kind of a performance. It's all kind of an act. And that's just what I kind of like about this. And this really emphasizes that aspect. And so for me, this is kind of textbook exactly what I would want the Riddler to be. Obviously, like I said, I'm not saying he should be written the same way every single gosh dang time, but I actually really like Riddler as a cheater who pretends not to be.
Okay.
I feel like there's a lot in this book that I do think is right, Matt, and specifically the moment you've mentioned, there's some good Riddler lines here. There's some good Riddler moments. Specifically where he's kind of just spelling out like how he views the world and how he wants things to be interpreted as. Because why I think the Riddler always kind of works as like kind of that, you know, the old adage of like, oh, the best Batman Rose Gallery are all because they're all reflections of him. It kind of gets repeated a lot, but there is some truth to it. Like it is legitimately why Batman has got one of the best Rose Galleries, is because the Riddler embodies the immaturity of Batman. The Riddler is the idea of an 8-year-old getting angry at the world not being fair and thinking they can prove it by just being more awesome. He's that kind of energy turned to the negative. He's Batman's will of self-improvement and Batman's will of becoming a symbol and becoming better and changing people, but only to prove how cool he is and how things should be told how he is right. So when the Riddler does that, I feel like there's some strong stuff in here. So I'm not inherently against the idea, like when he's a kid, he has a puzzle and he does it over and over and over again until he gets it faster and faster and faster, and then he's just great at it. And then even after that, the adulation falls and he needs the next high to get the recognition. I'm not initially opposed to that when he's young, but I do feel like after a point, like Batman, after he's done his training, so to speak, he should be at just, okay, this is how I got to this. Because Lex Luthor has moments like that, where he's young and he's trying to figure something out, so he kind of cheats. But once he's cheated, he kind of doesn't need to do that anymore, and he kind of gets past that and goes from being Edward Nygma to being the Riddler. And when he's the Riddler, he's this force of nature who is probably smarter than Batman. But what stops him every time is he's just so fucking full of himself that he's already a genius, but he thinks he's smarter than that. And that's what I really like about the Riddler, is he's legitimately stone cold brilliant. He doesn't need to cheat. He doesn't need to do all these riddles. He could beat Lex Luthor in chess. But to do so, he'd have to also mime to Lex Luthor while he's doing what his next move's going to be, because he thinks, well, he won't figure it out. Like, it's that kind of level of pay. It's that kind of level of sheer force of will turned into the most sad, pathetic Twitter nerd rager you could possibly find. that makes the Riddler to me go from generic quiz-based supervillain that you see dime a dozen to one of the best supervillains in comics, because I think that Riddler has more pathos to it. It's not the only way to write Riddler. I think your adage is true. I think there's a place for both our takes. And what I think is interesting is we've both looked at this and taken different things away from it. So I'm glad that this Riddler exists, because I do think there's some stuff here. And I think like Neil Gaiman appreciates this Riddler more. I feel like, though, for a year one type story that's trying to get to like the primal root of a character and trying to be like a thesis on it, personally, for my opinion, I'd go for something more akin to like War of Jokes and Riddles or Zero Year, for the Riddler as the mythic opposition to Batman's myth. Whereas this feels more like how like a Nolan take on the Riddler would be. We're a little bit more pared down, a little less extravagant, a little bit more realistic in how he could do all these things, next to a more realistic Batman, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The thing for me, and I talk about this all the goddamn time, so, you know, Alfie's going to roll his eyes about it, but for me, what I like about this is it meshes so well with my favorite Riddler story, which is...
What's that, Ian?
Riddle Me That, Alfie. It's from Legends of the Dark Knight, number 185 to 189. It's a really, really good Riddler story that attempts to, like, reboot and refresh the character. And what's really funny, spoilers for that, what's really funny is that story harps on this origin, because it deals with the idea that the Riddler, you know, as a kid cheated to make himself look smart, and that story goes, no, your dad beat you and told you cheated. This isn't a test you could cheat on. This is a test to measure intelligence. You can't figure that out ahead of time without being able to pass it in the first place. It's just a native test to be able to figure out your intelligence level. But your horrible upbringing like suppress that within you, which is in its own way generic, but I think it was a clever way to work it in. And so like I kind of like the idea that the only thing that's ever held the Riddler back and kind of had this like he's a bit pathetic side to him is just this self-doubt thing that he's kind of carrying around, but he's also like it's also really complicated and muddied with this kind of self-importance, self-doubt masquerading as self-confidence, as it were. And I think that's really fun, and this works so well. And also, I really like this story because he's fucking brilliant in it. Like, goddamn, all this shit is so crazy and super fun. And, the fact of the matter is, there's riddles in it and puzzles within puzzles and shit like that, and it all like leads to just this absurd Batman 66 level riddle where you could never ever possibly get the answer, but Batman does it, and I love it. It's so good. The fucking bank heist in this is 110% amazing. Like, I'm so mad it's not on film because it should be. Like, the idea, like, okay, how do you rob a bank on a Riddler level? It's like, oh, you flood the vault in order to corrupt the safe and open the door. Like, God, that is so perfect to me.
Absolutely. No, I love it. And it's interesting because one of my favorite non-comic takes on the Riddler is the first Arkham game, and they actually work in the abusive father and the cheating to go hand in hand, where they both happened, where he was a cheat, but he also had an abusive father. And so, there are clearly a lot of elements from this story that have resonated throughout. And there's a lot of personal touches that I really like in this. Like how Riddler goes through a couple different costume changes, and he gets, of course, my favorite Riddler supporting characters who never get enough love, Echo and Query, who are dressed as fucking showgirls because of course they are, because all he's trying to do is look impressive. And so I fucking love this. And yeah, this is Echo and Query's first appearance, and I adore them. They are some of my favorite like minor characters in Batman, and I want to see more of them.
I love their little origin in here too. Like, they were gonna mug him, and somehow, some way, he talked these two absolutely drop dead gorgeous women who clearly have some kind of like adrenaline kick thing into being his sidekicks. Yep. Or not even his sidekicks, into being his henchwomen. Like, God, that is so fucking perfect. And, like, it just works really well, like, in kind of the grander narrative we're talking about here, since we're covering year one. It works so well in, yeah, these are the kinds of people that are starting to get attracted to Gotham. They want to dress up in crazy fetish wear, like fucking thong-level fishnet stockings and go around Gotham and do crimes, because apparently that's a thing that you can do. And Riddler is just all too happy to take advantage of it. It's so perfect. I also love the fact that Echo and Query look like Frank Miller level mutants.
Yep. One of them even has the visor.
Yeah, I know, right? It's so good. Frank Miller doesn't know how to draw eyes, so he just draws the visor. I'm convinced of it. He does it so goddamn often and on close-ups. But like, just, I don't know, stuff like that's really cool to me. I also really just I like the thumb in his nose. Like, I like that he sends a riddle to the police, and like they don't even show up because it was too clever for him, and it also wasn't obnoxious enough since it was just a letter in the mail. And so he has to escalate it, and he just sends a package that blows up in the middle of Gotham police headquarters. It's just filled with riddles. That's so fucking elaborate. I love it.
That one is good. I think on the Echo and Query thing, an aspect of the Riddler that this kind of touches on, and some other things do, but isn't nearly explored as much as is with Joker or even Catwoman, is just like Riddler's got a very, very big and prominent female fan base. The Riddler, for a long time, a lot of people's fan casts for Riddler were like David Tennant. Like, people really like hot, sexy, kind of pathetic Riddler. I don't know what it is, but it's very apparent, and I'm all for it leaning into that a little bit more, especially because when you get down to it, Riddler's probably one of the most like stable Batman villains there is to kind of like have that with. Like, Joker's a monster in a human flesh costume. Like, he's just hellish, and like Harleen does a good job explaining like he can be pretty on the outside but is the big bad wolf. Riddler, however, is just kind of cute. He's just kind of dorky. He's just, even at his, like, he'll kill people, but his body count is pretty low compared to other Gotham villains. And most of the time, he never even really bothers to kill people. I don't think he kills a single person in this.
He really doesn't.
So I feel like that's something I maybe like to see explored a little bit more, is that he wants to make himself look cool, and it starts working. Like, we get some of that here, but like, the folks start leaning into him a bit more, and we see that with Arkham Query. But I don't know, I could see Riddler having like a very strong Tumblr following, because he does in real life.
He definitely does. I mean, and it helps. How do I say this? I feel like it helps that he's maybe a little queer coded, I think, personally. And I think that does help that a little bit. I mean, he's this guy who's very image obsessive. He's got 2 female best friends. He's very into how he looks. I think his behaviors, like a lot of Batman villains, especially like we've done with the Joker and things like Dark Knight Returns, you have a little bit of that there that you can read into if you really want to. I think there's a lot of layers to that character with the Riddler, and I feel like there's just kind of a reason. I mean, when you look at like who they cast for Riddler in the new movie, he's like this kind of weird looking, kind of dopey looking guy, and I think that's kind of perfect because you can either take him in that kind of weird, pathetic direction or make him sad and hot like David Tennant. But yeah, I like Riddler a lot. I like this story, and yeah, I like the way he slowly escalates not only his schemes, but the way he escalates his look and the way he escalates his persona. And it always reminds me of one of my favorite Riddler lines in all of media is the fucking line from Batman Forever where he's like, your entrance was good, his was better, the difference showmanship. I'm like, yeah, that's the Riddler. So I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I think it's good. So when you were reading this, did you take the time to sit there and see if you could figure out the riddles, or did you just accept that they were going to be way too heady and there was no possible way to figure them out?
I didn't try.
Yeah, same. I've never once in my entire life tried to figure out a Riddler thing. I've got stuff to do, man. I'm just not here for it. That's why I think just inherently, I've always got respect for people who write the Riddler, because fuck that, man. I just can't. My brain just does not work that way. I'm just not here for it. I would be defeated by the Riddler very quick.
I'm still laughing at Banquet though.
Yeah, so Banquet, and it's like, I love that it's all revealed in the way Jim Gordon's Chicago accent still works, and like that's a detail you can read in a comic book. Thanks. It just all hinges on such like an impossible thing. I think that's so good, and I also I don't know. I like the escalation of everything. Everything gets just insane. Just things get crazy and complicated, and it's really, really cool. I quite like this story. It's just a fun one. I don't know if there's a ton more I have to say about it, unfortunately. I feel like we ragged on the Catwoman one for way too long, and then we're kind of going a little short on this one that generally I like quite a bit. I guess we haven't really talked much about Batman and how he plays in this, since this is still, by definition, kind of early days Batman.
I quite like the idea. I don't really like the dialogue, But I do like the idea of he's kind of already sick of the theme villains. He's just started, and he's already like, all right, when's this fad gonna end? And then you get to like fucking year 5, and he just sits alone in the cave of Alfred. He's like, oh god, I've just fought Egghead, and my batsuit is just covered in eggs. I built this for paramilitary warfare, Alfred. Like that shit's always really great to me. I love seeing Golden Age urban Batman slowly morph into Silver Age Batman, kicking and screaming. So that's always just a delight. But I don't really like how Batman in this, his voice is very, very late 90s, early 2000s of just like, we're trying to do Dark Knight Returns. We're trying to make him brutal and kind of... I get that they're going for the bully imagery because it's from Riddler's perspective, so you can kind of have the argument, oh, well, Riddler's an unreliable narrator. He's making Batman seem more of a dick. But I don't know, man. I always feel like Batman's first meeting with the Riddler would be one more of like, really? Like, confused bewilderment. Especially because no one's dead. It's just robbering. So I think a lot of their first... And why Riddler probably wants to one-up it and show Batman why he's so great would probably be because... didn't take me seriously.
I think that's fair. I quite like the portrayal of Batman in here. I think he's not too brutal or anything in this. I think he's pretty simple. I guess maybe like he's like visually shown to be a bit more brutal. Like fucking just ties a tether to the briefcase and pulls Echo Requiri out of the car.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just comic book stuff to me. That's just like, it's like one of those things where like, you know, in movies when like they're breaking into a place and they just like hit someone on the back of the head with a gun and then the person like collapses on the floor unconscious and presumably they wake up like 3 hours later and they're just fine. They're like, oh, that was weird. No, if you hit someone on the head hard enough to make them go unconscious, you have given them a concussion, which is a serious bodily injury from which they could obtain lifetime damage. But we don't treat it that way. Like I honestly feel like you're stretching if you're gonna say that person's actually harmed. I think certain levels of action in comic books are just so heightened and so crazy that I just kind of take them as, oh no, they're fine. It's like I remember one time in high school I like went through actually real story. When I was in high school, I was driving down the highway and my tire in my car went out, so I tried to pull over. And I tried to pull over on the shoulder, and it didn't work out. I ended up spinning the car, and I spun the car and rolled down a ditch. And yeah, the car rolled on me. It was frightening, but I was fine. Didn't have a scratch on me. Everything was fine, and I just kind of feel like that's what happens. Like, oh yeah, it'll all work out. You're fine. You just got yanked out of the car. It's no big deal. You walk it off. So like, I guess if you're gonna try to scrutinize it that much, it probably doesn't hold up. But I did quite enjoy this. I did think that like, just the way he shows up and takes people down, and just the way he's working with Gordon, I thought was really cool. I particularly like, again, this feels very much like an extension in a number of ways of Year One, particularly with that relationship with Gordon. It feels very akin to what we saw in The Man Who Laughs, where like they're starting to work together a little bit more. And so I really like the idea that like Gordon's officers are like, he's leaving the roof wide open. What's Gordon thinking? And the one guy goes, think about it, man. Think about it. It's like, and Batman's on the roof. I thought that was a really cool thing. So like Gordon's, arranging things to allow Batman in on the missions and stuff like that. I think that's so cool.
I gotta say though, this was a real breath of fresh air for me, because I had kind of fallen off of Batman a little bit after the wedding. Not that anything after it was necessarily bad. I just kind of had other stuff going on. I kind of fell off it. So when Tynion came on, I started kind of trying to pick it back up. And like the second issue of Tynion's run, we had Riddler who he's got the weird question mark scar on his chest now, which like whatever. I don't love that, but whatever. But we've got this Riddler who's like in issue 87 of Batman, he's like all gaunt and skinny and just like fucking insane and crazy. And I'm just like, man, that in no way feels like the Riddler to me. Like Riddler is not that level of fucking like, there are different ways to show a character is like insane or crazy in like a Batman Rogues Gallery type way. And so seeing that Riddler, which immediately made me just kind of not really want to read that book, that issue. And then going back to this Riddler, who I'm like, yes, he probably needs therapy, but he's not every Batman villain. We have to escalate the like mental illness levels up to that. So I was just, it was nice to go back to this and see a Riddler a lot closer to what I'm used to and what I like to see from this character. So I maybe enjoyed it even more because of that. I don't know.
I can definitely agree with you there.
Say what?
I definitely agree with you there. I don't like Joker light Riddler, which he kind of was only like the 60s show. I
think Arkham City, when I think of like interpretations of the Riddler, is probably the most sadistic I would ever really want to see Riddler. Like Arkham City is probably the limit to where I would really want to see Riddler go with the death traps, because I'm not a big fan. I like the idea that he does these elaborate theme heists and crimes, and like, yeah, people probably get hurt, but whatever, they were in the way. But like, I've never been a fan of like he legit goes after people and stuff like that. I've never really been super into that, except for if it's like a personal vendetta type thing. So Arkham City is about as like sadistic I really want to see this character. And so it was just nice to go back to this, because like Riddler to me, I feel like kind of works when even if you have a very gritty Batman world, he still feels like he kind of steps out of a different time in Batman publication history.
He is one of those characters that's harder to fit in because of that, I think.
That's fair.
Because, like, you got the Gaiman story, which it's a great story because it's Neil Gaiman, of course it is, but, like, you get the Gaiman story where Riddler has to say, oh, the Joker kills people now. Can you imagine? And I'm like, oh, you kind of immediately lock down that the Riddler can never do that. And it's like, oh, well, that's difficult. Yeah.
He's a difficult character to, like, modernize in a way that I guess people feel would resonate with like current audiences in a sense, right?
My main issue, I feel like that though, and I harp on this point a lot whenever this comes up, is that is not the fault of the Riddler. That is the fault of DC failing the Riddler. The Riddler is a character idea, and like supervillains do not need to kill to be interesting. Yeah, 2012, absolutely. 2005, get this through your fucking head. The Joker's more interesting when he's one of the few who's that bad. When every fucker's got the Joker's death toll, he doesn't become special, and it doesn't make them any more special. It just makes them. It makes the loss of life in comics just a commodity, and it's one of the big issues in comics, specifically Batman comics, is just how
why the fuck does anyone live in Gotham?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. To that extent, it's like, oh, Gotham was bad because they've got some of the most elaborate supervillains, just mostly just annoying, and they've got some pretty tough mob bosses who just kind of quit now because the supervillains were just making everything a joke. But then you get the supervillains who like the hardened people, like eating people and doing all this crazy stuff, and it's just like, now and again, you need to remember these stories are still meant to be for children. And while we're also going for different markets and applicable, you don't need to have these characters be limited in their storytelling potential by grit. They can do gritty Riddler stories. Like, I think what you say, Ian, your favorite story, Riddle Me That, has done a very good line of, okay, the Riddler can be a threat, the Riddler can be deadly, the Riddler can fight Batman at his game, it was straight take Batman, but it's also just silly enough, just out there enough, where Riddler can also be in like a Robin villain issue, where it's just having a fun time and no one gets hurt. Like, I think that's an example of a good, flexible character, not one who's difficult per se. It's just the status quo of what Batman needs to be is tilted too far in one direction.
Plus the idea of a character who's constantly trying to prove himself, I think, is kind of interesting. I think I need to reread more of Jokes and Riddles, but Joker's got a line where he's just like, you're just the Riddler. Who cares about the Riddler or something to that?
I love that line so
I'm like,
much.
yes, oh my God, yes, that's exactly it. Like he's the Riddler. Who cares? He's a guy who does these heists, and we should probably stop him because he's probably going to accidentally hurt someone someday. So we should hurt himself. Yeah, he's going to hurt himself. Someone's going to get hurt. We should probably do something about him. He's just kind of an annoyance. And Riddler hates that that's how he's viewed in a sense. And so I love that. And it's that's why I harp on loving whiny, petulant Riddler so much, because I like the idea of him just always trying to make himself more than he is, and that he could be more. He just gets in his own way. And there's so much interesting stuff with the Riddler, but it seems like every time we try to anytime someone pitches me like a modernized, like Nolanized Riddler or some shit, they're always just like, well, what if he's Jigsaw? And I'm just like, can we stop? So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't mind if he's got, like, a death trap or something, but at the end of the day, it needs to be, like, that needs to be the climax of it, right?
Yes.
It can't be everything's a fucking death trap, you know? That's where the problem comes in. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about with this story, or at least I want to make sure we talk about, is the framing device of it, with Riddler kind of in Arkham, confessing to the shrinks, his origin. What'd y'all think of that?
I mean, it didn't bother me per se. Again, I don't necessarily know that I like doing, again, super crazy, talks to himself Riddler, but the idea that he's going on this long, elaborate soliloquy of a rant telling his amazing origin story, and then it kind of undercuts it at the end with what's going on where he's, being carted away. I think it works fine. I don't have a huge issue with it, but
see, I thought the framing device really helped work with the this guy's kind of pathetic feeling that the Riddler has. I thought the idea that, like, okay, he's pouring his heart out and he's talking about how great and awesome he is and everything that he did right, and like how Batman got him this one time, but after this he's gonna prove da 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 da, and then in the end it's just, oh yeah, there was no one even there. He's so pathetic. They just left in the middle of his story. Like, that is so funny to me, and it works so well for that character,
Yeah.
I really like that part about it. Alfie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same camp as you. I think it's fun for the idea of Riddler talent. Of course, if you're going to do a Riddler story, Riddler has to be the one to tell it. It just fits his character too well to do it. I feel like maybe they could have gone not as far. You could have just had them fall asleep or something. I think that would have been the more... It's not necessarily everything that... Because, like, again, just, like, walking out of your patient seems a bit fucking like Jesus. No wonder Arkham's failing. Not like falling asleep's any bad, but I feel like it's at least they're still in the room. Idea, I think maybe could have been... You don't need to turn it... He doesn't need to be portrayed as that pathetic. To the point where you can have a joke at him, but he himself isn't someone that you can just turn your back on. And if it's suspected, everything's going to be fine, the Riddler's going to be there. Like, I think that could have been... You could have made something funny of just like, oh, we know we can't not have cameras on him at all times because he'll get out. But fuck, is he just boring to listen to? It makes us want to let him go. Like, you could have had a good moment, like a security guard with like 5 cups of coffee, like, shut up. Like, I think that's the way you go, is you get the threat and you get the annoying and you tie them together. You don't just kind of undercut the whole story at the end for me. But again, there's a minor quibble. I still think it's a good framing device.
You say that, and I'm hesitant to talk about this because I know a couple people from my work do listen to my podcast, but I'm gonna go for it. So there's this one guy at work, and he's a cool enough guy, but sometimes he doesn't realize that he can get kind of annoying. And like, I think the way you write Riddler is kind of like this dude, where it's you just like in the middle of your thing, you're doing whatever, and then he just goes, huh, that'd be interesting. What would? Oh, it's just this interesting thing I was thinking about. You see, I
Yes.
just like no prompting, just in the middle, like everything's quiet, and then just all of a sudden, you know what? I think that's a cool idea. Or Ian, what do you think about that? What do I think about what? Well, there's this episode of the X-Files. What the fuck? We weren't even fucking talking about the X-Files. Oh, sorry. Yeah, if anyone's from work listening, which I don't think you are, everyone's like, oh, you have a YouTube channel? Cool, I'm gonna watch it. I'm like, you're gonna get bored. You're gonna watch like 5 minutes of it and then get bored. Yeah, go ahead and leave a comment if you got this far in the episode. I'll heart and like it and everything, guys. Yeah, that's what I got. Anyway. All right, let's go ahead and do ratings. Alfie, I'm kind of most curious about your scores because I feel like I know where Matt and I are going to end up. So why don't you rate stuff first for us?
Oh boy, way to put the pressure on me. Well, I suppose I have to carry something in this shit show. For me, with the Catwoman one, because I think we've unanimously decided this is the weaker of the two stories, I was just more lukewarm on it than anything. But kind of talking over it, I do feel like it's just the aspect you mentioned, Ian, of just being like the missed potential for the banner, especially in the light of year one having a really solid take on Catwoman, I think puts it down a few pegs than it would have normally if it was just released as an issue in the Catwoman book proper. Which it was an annual, but it's still got the year one banner, so it's got that extra little tinge to it. So I'm gonna give this 2 out of 5 Hellhounds. No. 2 out of 5 Neko-chans.
Damn it, Alfie.
Went
stole mine.
a chance to use that. And then after that, for the Riddler one, I'm not as on board with it as you two are, but at the same time, I think it's a very serviceable story. I could see it recommended to someone as just a Riddler fan. It's a solid take. I also feel it doesn't quite live up to the hype that a year one book kind of demands, but then at this point, like, how could anything? I think it's definitely weaker than Man Who Laughs, and definitely weaker than both the Ray stories. But at the same time, it's a decent enough Batman Riddler one shot that I could bump it up to, let's say, 3 out of 5 scantily clad henchwomen.
Alfie likes his scantily clad henchwomen.
Well, that's what you two are.
Aww.
My sexy fellas.
Oh my. Alrighty. Matt, why don't you go next?
Yeah, so the Catwoman story, really didn't care for it. I did feel, I mean, insulted is a strong word, so I'm not going to go that far, but I really didn't care for a lot of the choices that were made here. If we're just going on a pure 5-point scale, for me, it's probably going to be a 1 out of 5, probably a 1, man, I don't even know. A 1 suit that was made for going into an active volcano.
God damn it, you stole mine! Fuck.
And the Riddler one, I'm probably being more generous than I need to be, but on a pure 5-point scale, I really had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed my time reading it. I never really found myself bored or anything by the book. I really enjoyed going on the ride with it. So I'm going to give that 1 of 5 ticking riddle boxes out of 5.
Nice. So now that both of these fuckers have stolen my Catwoman things, yeah, the Catwoman story is just not very good. It's got a lot going against it, to be fair, but it is just awkward at best. So I'm going to give it 1.5 out of 5 dominatrixes. Like, that was how that's how you open that book, right? Like, just Catwoman just doming the shit out of somebody. Or no, never mind. I got those comics. It's fine.
Rubbing Batman's nipples.
Yeah, rubbing Batman's nipples. That's what it's all about. It's like, you like your nipples rubbed, don't you, Batman? And he's like, no, mistress. And she's like, yes, you fucking do, you scum. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the Catwoman one. The Riddler one, I'm gonna give 4 out of 5 wet banquets.
I see it. Chicago's coming out.
Yeah, like he says that, and I'm from a close enough region that I really do have to start saying banquet, and I'm wondering if it's lingering on the banquet. So I don't know. We'll see. Banquet. Alfie, say banquet?
Banquet.
Ah, goddamn, fucking classy British bitch. Okay. Well, next week we'll be moving on, and we'll be talking about Legends of the Dark Knight annual number 5 from 1995, which is a Man-Bat story, and Shadow of the Bat annual number 3 from 1995, which is a Poison Ivy story. So, should be a grand old time. Matt, thanks a ton for joining us on this one. This was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I always enjoy spending time chatting with you.
Aw. And everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the champion of the oppressed.
I'm the Sonic Erotica lover.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.